How is everyone today? Hello everyone once again. And everyone show up. That's pretty cool. You guys never disappoint. Always joining me here in my streams, which is pretty cool. And today we have a very exciting stream, by the way. We are going to talk about PHP 8.3 and everything coming new to this new PHP version. That's right. That's right. You guys rock, which is pretty cool. And yeah, today we are going to see what's new in PHP 8.3. Let me know how the music is for you all. I've been struggling with the music, you know. Sometimes it's just too low. Sometimes it's just too loud. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Okay. That's right, Tutu. You guys are a rock. No, you rock. You are not a rock, okay? How everyone is doing today? I had a very busy day today. I was working on having some of my packages ready for PHP 8.3, which is coming out in this November, but because some of those packages are like used by other packages, I kind of need to have everything ready up front. There is also Symfony 7 coming, which was also a bunch of work getting that ready as well. Kind of having all the packages compatible for Symfony 7 as well. Laravel 11 being prepared under the hood for next year, early next year. So a lot of work today, but it was fun. It was super fun. It was a busy day, but kind of fun. Anyways, that being said, today we are talking about PHP 8.3, okay? And for those who don't know, PHP it's coming from a long way, you know what I mean? Right now we are on PHP 8.2, which was a very successful release, I would say. But now we are going to have PHP 8.3 coming out this November, I feel like. Let me double check. And yes, PHP 8.3 is coming out November 23, which is a very close date. And today we are going to cover everything coming new for PHP 8.3. Before we jump into that, I have prepared a small surprise for you all. I have kind of prepared a small example to show you how PHP have evolved. Okay, so I'm going to show you very early example of PHP code of PHP from 5.6, and I'm going to show you that same example written with PHP 8.2. Just to show you how PHP have progressed during the years. Before we jump into that, let me just double check the chat here and just say hi to some people. I can see that some people are just coming back to my streams, which is pretty cool. I feel that we are building a community here. We have Meirelles coming back again. Roberto, always here. Mary as well, which is pretty cool. DC Blog, how you doing? I'm doing fantastic, by the way. Tutu as well. I think I've seen him before here on the streams. And yeah, and this is asking me, when are you coming to Brazil? So I have said, like in the previous live stream, that going to Brazil is probably one of my life goals for next year. There is this PHP Brazil conference coming up, which I feel that I probably should apply. But I don't know. But I will try to go to a big conference in Brazil next year, okay? I will do my best to be there next year. That being said, are you guys excited for today's stream? I'm going to just show you something I have prepared for you all before we jump into what's new in PHP 8.3, which is kind of the history of PHP, where PHP is coming from. So I have this small example written in Sublime Text, which is written with PHP 5.6. Okay, this is like, I don't know, probably 8 years ago, 10 years ago, I don't even know. But at the time, we didn't had any kind of typed properties. Let me just put the chat here on the right. So yeah, with PHP 5.6, we didn't have typed properties. We didn't have typed parameters. Property promotion was not there as well, as you can see. Return types. And yeah, really the way of having some kind of objects with encapsulation and some kind of typing was using PHP annotations for this. So that was the way of having the people communicating with other developers, the type of the given parameter as well. And kind of to have some encapsulation to make kind of the information private on the object so other people cannot change that information behind the scenes. People used to use getters just like that. So if I would have something like a new person with the name Nuno, I could easily get the name of that person just by typing PHP, just by var dumping and calling the object is get name function, and that would give me the name back. Now, I'm going to kind of transform this code now and involve this code until PHP 8.2, which is the current version of PHP, so you can see really the difference about how PHP have become clean. And I can see that Andres is saying here on the chat that PHP 5.6 was released in August 2014, which is pretty cool. Now, so again, let's just migrate this code, which is written with PHP 5.6, and migrate this code to PHP 8.2. And we can jump into PHP 7.0, which was the very first version introducing parameter types and return types. And with that, something we could do very easily is just basically remove the PHP annotation, just like that, and introduce the parameter type directly on the code, which is pretty cool. In addition, stuff such as return types could also be used with this version. So something we could do is just basically type the return or what's being returned from the get name function, and just basically directly there on the code. And obviously, if I run this, I can have the same result, which is Nuno, okay? So this is written with PHP 7.0, which was the first version introducing type parameters, but also return types. Now, let's jump into PHP 7.4. Okay, and this was the first version introducing typed properties. So obviously at this moment we have the parameters typed, but also the return types, but we don't have yet the properties being typed. So something we can do with PHP 7.4 is really just remove the PHP annotation and just type that property directly on the code itself, which is pretty cool. Now, something you probably have noticed is that we are not using property promotion, okay? So we are going to jump into PHP 8.0 to start using property promotion. And if you have heard about property promotion, but you don't know what it is super simple. So the only thing you have to do to use property promotion is that instead of declaring the property right here on the top, you just declare it directly on the parameter itself. So now I can simply remove this parameter, and if I run PHP index, I pretty much get the same result. So the declaration of the property is happening right there on the parameter, and I can style this a little bit if I want to, just to make it a little bit more clear, and I obviously get the same result. So at this moment we are on PHP 8.0, which was kind of a very a big version of PHP, because besides new features we also have major performance improvements. So that was a big jump to PHP as well, okay? Next, let's talk now about PHP 8.1, which was the very first version introducing read-only properties. Now, sometimes people ask me, why do I make stuff private behind the scenes, such as this parameter, but also this property private, and then I do a getter? So the real reason is that I want to make this object immutable, so I don't want this object to actually being possible to change the name. Okay, so people, when they create or they interact with my object, which is this variable a, they cannot simply come here and change the name just like that. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the goal of having this properties private, is make this object immutable so it doesn't change over time. Okay. But with PHP 8.1, we introduced something really cool, which is read-only parameters, or read-only properties. So something I can do here is just type private read-only string name, okay? And with this read-only, what I'm really doing is that I'm instructing PHP that the name property can only be changed on the constructor, meaning that now I can make this property public and I can remove the getter, because I know this particular thing is immutable. It won't change because it's read-only, okay? So I can access the name of my object, just basically referencing the name property right there. And if I run this code, hopefully it's still working as expected, and it's not working as expected. So let's just take a peek on this to see what's happening. Obviously, we have this full stack trace happening here. Oh, we don't need even this. I can just remove this assignment in the middle of my constructor because things just work, okay? So the given parameter name will be assigned to my public property name automatically, and you don't have to change a thing. How cool is that? In addition, I am confident that I can make this property public because I know this property is read-only, so it won't change over time. How nice is that? Tell me on the chat what do you think about this, because I think read-only properties was a big thing in PHP because it allows us to make most of our stuff immutable, which is pretty cool. Now, I want to jump into PHP 8.2, which is the recent version of PHP, okay? The most recent is the current one, actually. Something we have noticed when using something like read-only is that sometimes we have like mutable properties. So obviously we can have the name, but also the birth date and, I don't know, a second name even. And it was kind of a bummer have to type this read-only all the time. So something that PHP 8.2 introduced is this read-only class, okay? So you can remove this read-only from properties, just like that, and have only this read-only on top to mark the entire class as read-only. So now, if I run this particular code, this should be exactly the equivalent and is much cleaner than having read-only keyword in all over our attribute properties, which I think is pretty cool. And obviously this still marks the property as a read-only. So if I do something like a name equals to, I don't know, let's say tutu, if I try to do this, PHP won't allow me to do this. Will tell me that there is an error here. You cannot modify the read-only property person name because the entire class is read-only, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, so yeah, at the moment we are seeing code from PHP 8.2, and I don't know what you guys think on the chat, but this is so much cleaner than before. What do you guys think? Let me know in the chat, because I feel like what we had before, which I think was kind of the equivalent of 30 lines of code, we can now have those 30 lines of code in only 10 lines of code, and things are still readable. I feel like we have made a huge progress since PHP 5.6. Let's read a little bit the chat here to see what people think about this. So we have Tutu asking if this stuff work with private. Yeah, you can mark private properties as read-only if you want to. You can do that indeed. It's also something that people do sometimes, you know. They may want to have the property private to the class only, but also read-only. So that works as well. Mary is saying read-only classes look great. Indeed, I mean, real objects, like if we work with real objects, obviously they don't have only one property, right? They have multiple properties, A, B, C, D, you know, like multiple stuff here. And the reality is that marking all those properties sometimes with read-only keyword can be kind of too verbose, you know, just too much stuff to type, and just being able to type the entire class as read-only, I think it's a big win. I'm happy about those changes. To be honest, syntactic sugar are my favorite features in PHP. Logan is saying read-only is good. I was already very used to it using in C#. Yeah, I know that C# has this feature, and I think it's pretty cool that sometimes we inspire ourselves in other languages, in the same way that other languages also inspire themselves in PHP. We have the case of, I don't know, React, for example, doing those server-side components, for example, which is heavily inspired in PHP, and I think it's fine. It's okay. DC Blog is saying much cleaner. I do agree. And Serge J is saying helps a lot to write proper typed code. Yes, Serge J, indeed. Well, I'm a big fan of types in general. And I do recommend you all on the stream to check out PHP Stan and Latastan for Laravel, because, well, these types are very useful indeed. You know, I'm going to show you why types are useful, by the way, just in case you don't know. I'm going to just type here on top something like declare strict types real quick. So if I were to use something like this, read-only person class and this constructor with this string name, and then I were to type something like new person with an integer, PHP hopefully won't allow me to do this. And it doesn't, okay? Starts to complain because it's saying, okay, well, I expect a name as a string, however, you are giving me an integer as the first argument. So this is really the value of typing your code. It's because besides being expressive about your public API, you are also kind of explaining PHP. You shouldn't run even if people do stuff like this, which is pretty cool. However, with PHP Stan, this goes to another level when we can also have another live stream just about PHP Stan, but the fact that you can't, with PHP Stan, you can analyze this thing as at static time, meaning that you don't have to even run your code to understand that is issues. I think it's pretty cool. So look for PHP Stan on Google and understand why static analyzing your code can be really, really helpful. Let me just unpack all of this stuff here so we can proceed with the demo today. There we go. Okay, so a little bit of more chat and then we jump into what's new in PHP 8.3. Eduardo is saying, for a few properties, yes, please. Unfortunately, I've seen a nightmare where I have more than 10 properties mixed in attributes and default values, and this can hurt a bit. Indeed. Vuka is saying, read-only classes are similar to DTOs. This is a great addition to PHP. I agree. Read-only classes and the simple DTOs objects can be really useful to your code. Okay. That being said, let's jump into what's coming new in PHP PHP 8.3, and I have this article from Brand. So if you don't know, Stitcher.io, it's probably one of my favorite blogs to follow up with PHP development. The creator is Brent, which is kind of a friend of mine, I would say. I have seen him in some conferences. He looks a cool dude. And also, he have a great blog. On his blog, it's pretty much the place I follow all the news in PHP. And one of those articles is what's coming new in PHP 8.3. So I feel like we can look at this article and just basically jump into our Sublime text to see what's coming new into our PHP land. And the first thing coming new for PHP 8.3 is this thing called read-only amendments, okay? And I feel like while this new feature is coming for PHP 8.3, I feel this is more like a fix, something that is being fixed from the previous versions, and I can show you clearly the problem. So I'm going to jump into my Sublime text, okay? And I obviously have this class person right here, and something I can do with PHP is that I can simply go here and I can type something like this. Okay, the person B will be a clone of the person A, and the person C will be a clone of the person A again. Now, by the way, cloning objects is already something you would probably not do in regular PHP code or regular applications, you know. But anyway, it was something fixed when cloning read-only classes or read-only objects, especially deep cloning. But I'm going to show you a clear example about what's going wrong and how PHP 8.3 fixed that issue, okay? So let's go to our person class once again, and let's just basically add something called a date time, okay? A date time with a birth date, just like that. Now, this birth date will be obviously the birth date of the person, right? And something I could do here is just bar dump, for example, the birth date of the person B, but also the birth date of the person C. And at the moment, obviously, this hopefully will be kind of the same. We have an issue here saying that we are passing only one object, one parameter here, and this requires two. So let's just basically type new date time here as well, clear our terminal and run PHP, index PHP again. We are getting on the var dump result the entire representation of the object. We obviously don't want to do this, so I can type something like format, just basically format this with the year, month, and date. And let's do the same for the second object just below. Clear our terminal and run PHP index to see the results. And I have obviously that the birth date of the person B is 10 October, but also for the person C is 10 October. Now, if I go, and this is the real thing, pay attention. If I go here to the person B and I just access to the birth date, I can do something like a little bit weird, which is set date to a different date, okay? And this is technically allowed because, I mean, I'm changing the birth date of the person B, okay? However, the results are kind of unexpected because the results is that while I'm changing the date for the person B, the person C is also getting the new date, okay? So changing the date for the person B is also changing the date for the person C. And that's because while we are cloning the person object, we are still referring the same birth date, date time object behind the scenes. So we are cloning the person, but not deep cloning the person to actually also clone the date. Now, typically, people would solve stuff like this using something like a public function with a clone, which is something really magical from PHP. And then they would instruct the person class how exactly you can clone the birth date. And that would be very simple. You would do something like this birth date equals to clone the current birth date. And if I do this, now I'm going to show you this stuff with PHP 8.2. So I'm going to just basically run this script to basically change PHP versions in my machine. If I type php-v, you can see that now I'm using PHP 8.2. Now, if I run this code, you will see that PHP will start to complain because it tells me that on the clone magic method, I cannot modify the birth date. Okay, so I cannot solve my problem of deep cloning directly on my magic clone method. So what PHP 8.3 introduced, and I do understand that this stuff is a little bit hard to understand because cloning is something typically not done in an application development. However, if I now move to PHP 8.3, and you can see that I'm PHP 8.3, and if I run this code, you get to see that now my code is working as expected, meaning that setting the date for the object B is not changing the date for the object C, which is pretty cool. And that is thanks to the fact that now on my magic method clone, I can finally change read-only properties. What do you guys think about this? I do understand that this stuff, I mean, it's kind of deep level, you know. Typically in application development, you don't need to do this kind of stuff of working with clones to begin with. However, I do understand why they needed to fix this, right? Obviously in PHP, especially on package development, you do need to clone objects sometimes. And the fact that you couldn't use the underscore clone to specify how to deep level, how to specify the deep level nesting of cloning, it's pretty cool that now you can actually do those stuffs back again with read-only properties. So let me know what you think about this new amendment. So I can see Christopher Rumpel is saying, do you use cloning in one of your projects lately? It's very likely that on stuff like past PHP or even other packages that are kind of framework level, you know, I do use clone all the time. And typically, yeah, specifying the deep cloning instance is something that I need to do all the time. So yeah, the fact that read-only was not would not allow to do that was a kind of a bummer. Something that it's kind of a blocker to be honest. So the fact that we can now do that is pretty cool. Okay, let's move forward to more exciting stuff, because this stuff is kind of, people don't actually care. Moving on, typed class constants. So typically in the past, you could do something like just come here, and let's just basically simplify a little bit our class once more to the way it was in the past. So let's just do something like, yeah, something like this. So again, back to the topic, typed classes constants. So typically in the past, you could create constants, you know, something like, I don't know, minimum age, for example, something like this, and say like 18, for example. And you could do this, but you couldn't specify the type of the constant. Okay, so I think to make things consistent, just the fact that you can type parameters, you can type return types, you can type properties, would be kind of cool to be able to type constants as well. Okay, so that's exactly what PHP 8.3 introduces, is that now you can also type constants as well. Okay, so now if I were to do something like, I don't know, echo person and then minimum age, just like that, you can now access to that constant, and you can obviously now type that constant as well. So this is also coming for PHP 8.3. Moving forward, we have something. Before moving forward, I would like to read this comment on the chat as well. Andrews is saying not being able to type constants never made sense for me. Yeah, well, Andrews, some people say that typing constants is something that makes sense. We also have other people who say that typing constants doesn't make sense at all. So I can explain you the reasons. So I understand that for being consistent, it's cool to be able to type constants, because obviously you can type parameters, you can type return types, you can type as well other stuff. So it would be cool as well to type constants. However, a constant is something that does not change, meaning that if you give an integer, obviously this will be an integer. You know what I mean? So some people say that typing constants is something that doesn't make sense, because the given value of the constant already tells you what type of the constant are you working with. However, I do understand for visual consistent that it does make sense to have this parameter being typed as well on the constants, okay? And I can see that you all are kind of happy about this change. So Sergey is saying, yep, very welcome change to be able to type constants. It's pretty cool. Doesn't make much sense. Yeah, David is saying what I was saying before, is that some people think that this doesn't make any sense because constants should never change anyways. Yeah, I don't know. I feel that people, everyone have its own opinion about this, but it's cool that we have the possibility of typing constants, even though some people may use it or some people may not use it. Okay. Moving forward, let's talk a little bit now about this new override attribute coming for PHP. Now, this one is actually interesting, okay? And before we jump to see what is the override attribute, which is used when you are extending a class, I want to show you, I want to kind of code the example before. So I have this read-only person, okay? And I'm going to code just below exactly the same class, just below, with the name, another person, for example, and this one will extend the original person. Okay, we'll have the same constructor. However, I'm going to code, I don't know, just kind of a public function foo, and this foo will return a string, and this string value will be foo as well. Okay, and I will have this this same method on the person class. Okay, so we have person class with foo method, and we have another person with a foo method. Now, typically, you do override other public functions from the parent class when you want to modify things. So typically here you would return something like another foo because you want to override the top behavior, okay? Now let's go back to the articles to see what this override attribute is about. And the article says the new override attribute is used to show the programmer is intent. It basically says, I know this method is overwriting a parent method. If that would ever change, please let me know. Okay, so let's do that. Let's just copy this override attribute and let's just put this override attribute over the top of the public function foo. Now, if I run this code, and I will basically just call foo on the new instance of the person, so I'm going to just do this and var dump that result just like that. Clear my terminal, type PHP index.php. We have some issues here because I'm not providing the person name. Let's just fix that. Clear the terminal, run PHP index.php, and I get to see foo on the console. However, if we go back to the article says, I'm overwriting the parent method. If that would ever change, please let me know. So I'm going to go back to my Sublime text, and I'm going to remove the foo method from the parent class, just like that. So what happened here is that previously I was overriding the behavior of the foo method of my parent class. However, the foo method doesn't exist anymore. So if I run php index.php, what PHP will tell me is another person foo as an override attribute. However, no magic parent method exists. So it's telling me that you had this override attribute because you were kind of overriding the public function on the parent class. However, that parent function no longer exists, so this code won't compile and won't run. What do you guys think? Do you guys think this was a good addition to PHP? It's called the override attribute, and yeah, will be on the new PHP version as well. I think personally is a good addition, meaning that typically if I'm overriding a parent function, I kind of want to be notified if my parent function changes or gets deleted behind the scenes. And if that happens, I want to be notified. So I think this override attribute is kind of a good addition to PHP. What do you guys think? I think it was a good one. Moving forward, negative indexes in arrays. Now, this one is a breaking change to begin with, however, is kind of interesting. So I'm going to just copy this example we have on this article, and I'm going to move this example here to the top of my PHP script. Now, I have a simple array, as you can see here, and this array is declared as an empty array. And then I'm using something kind of weird, which is saying, okay, on the -5 position, I'm going to put the value A, okay? And obviously, if I try to var dump this particular value, you will see, hopefully, that the array will have only one element, and that element will be placed on the -5 position with the value A. Now, something really funny have come to PHP 8.3. If you now try to do something like this, which is increment to the previous array a new value, something like, okay, just add this new element with PHP 8.3, that element will be placed on the position -4. So I call this a bug fix because previously, if you were to do something like clear this terminal and jump back to PHP 8.2, which is the current version, if we run this code, you will see that it doesn't behave exactly the same way, meaning that if I run this particular code, the new element will be placed on the position 0, meaning that we are going to have an array with a -5 with the value A, but also 0 with the value B. But now with PHP 8.3, we got this fixed, which is a fix in my opinion, and the new element will be placed exactly on the next position. So this is basically a bug fix for negative indexes, which is something that we didn't have before. So yeah, negative indexes on the array got kind of a slightly breaking change, something that you probably should be aware of if you are doing anything like this. Let's see what people on the chat are saying today. And answer me on the chat, are you enjoying this stream today? Are you guys excited about the new PHP features? Let's see what people are saying. So let's jump here to the top. Okay, so Nelson is saying, but when you override it and inheriting class is very useful to have typed. Yeah, I guess so. Tutu is blah, blah, blah. Tomás Suarez is saying, sup Nuno, big hug from Lydia. Tomás Suarez, I think this guy is probably someone that plays with me football. So hi Tomás, nice to see you here on the stream. Nelson is saying, but when you override it on inheriting class, it's very useful to have it typed. The constant. Oh, interesting. So interesting. So he's saying that probably when you have like two classes, and one of those classes inherits the behavior of the parent class, and if you want to override the constant value, it's probably useful to have it typed. Indeed. Sergey is saying, will be an info if you are shadowing the parent method without the override, and the answer is no, meaning that if you don't use the override attribute, PHP won't tell you a thing. So that's probably something intentional, because if they were to do something like that, it would be a breaking change. Tutu is saying about the negative indexes in array. This one I don't get. I have never had the situation where I create negative indexes. That's true. However, you cannot forget stuff like, I don't know, imagine that you have like something like a catalog, you know, a catalog that you need to send from the front end, and typically you would like to key value that catalog, like putting on -1 something, you know, like nothing selected, you know, nothing selected. Oh, there you go. Nothing selected, and then on the position 0, you actually want to put a product that starts on the position 0. Well, in this case, as you have a negative index, you know, and I do understand that typically you wouldn't kind of follow this with an increment. However, it's kind of cool to have that behavior fixed. You know what I mean? What else we have here? OBA is saying, I can think of a real life use case of the override. Well, sometimes you do override stuff from, I don't know, from the framework even, you know, and you want to be notified if that thing changes over time. So I think it's a good scenario. Tuto is saying, I get the update was needed. I just don't know any situation that I would require it. Yeah, typically people don't increment. If you are working with key value arrays, they don't increment new values using this syntax. I agree with you. Love from Pakistan, from Game Ranger. Fix A is saying, hello Nuno from Kea. Nice to see you, man. Nelson is saying, like created at the Eloquent model. Indeed, that's a good example. Mary is saying, definitely excited about constants and immutability. Syntactic sugar for the win. Wondering if strict equality evaluations work in all cases of cloned objects. Yeah, that's a good question. By the way, regarding the syntactic sugar, I also agree. Those are my favorite. You guys know what I would wish to see in PHP 8.3, and we need to do some kind of, I don't know, just send them a bunch of money, is like multi-line short closures, you know. This stuff, something like this, I would pay a bunch of money to have something like this in PHP 8.3, you know, like a bunch. It's kind of a shame that we don't have this in PHP 8.3. And I have actually created, let me see if I find this, PHP multi-line short closures. A couple of years ago, I myself created the PHP RFC. There we go. This is the one. PHP RFC short closures 2.0. So I've created this RFC together with Larry, which allows people, or basically proposes to PHP that we start allowing people to type multi-line short closures, something like this, you know. Sometimes you need to access the variable repository within the short closure, but also access, I don't know, the guests' IDs, for example, and you don't need to kind of specify all the uses within the short closure. So I think this will be really useful for PHP 8.3, but however, we don't have that yet. Sergio is saying multi-line short closures would be awesome. Dude, for real. I'm North, by the way, is saying we need error functions in PHP just like multi-line short closures. Exactly. Exactly. Everyone is loving multi-line short closures. I don't know why we don't have them. I think like the reasoning of the PHP core team to not have this multi-line short closures was kind of the misuse of something like this. But in reality, who does misuse this, you know? People would just love this, you know? It's such a easy change. I just don't get it. Anyway, we have time to see a couple of more changes coming to PHP 8.3. Let's take a look what we have here. Next change in the pipe is anonymous read-only classes. Okay, first of all, you guys don't need to use anonymous classes. Typically, there is kind of zero use cases for application development with anonymous classes. However, if we were to use something like this, you can now type read-only before the new class instance. So if you don't know what anonymous class is, it's pretty much the possibility of creating an anonymous class object. So don't have to specify the class name. You don't have to declare the class outside of the scope of your current code. So if you were to type something like this, obviously it just works as expected, but you were still able to do something like class foo equals to, instead of bar, nuno bar, for example. Okay, so this would obviously just work as normal, right? But now you can make this anonymous class read-only, and if you do this, PHP will complain that your anonymous class have this foo property, and that foo property cannot change over time. So kind of a consistency addition. We needed to have this in PHP, so I'm happy to see this coming as well. Now, this one is finally something that we would use ourselves. JSON validate is coming to PHP, and I can show you how bummer it was to kind of validate if a JSON was valid. So let's go back to our Sublime text here. Let's just type something like JSON string equals to valid JSON. Let's just type name equals to, let's see someone on the chat. Let's see Mary, for example. Okay. So if we were to type something like this, okay, and you were to, our job is validate this JSON, not kind of access to the JSON data, but just check if this thing is valid. You would have to type something like this, okay? Okay, I'm gonna decode this stuff. I'm gonna decode this JSON string. And then I'm gonna do this. Not this, what is called the thing? JSON last error, I think that's a thing, right? There you go. If the JSON last error equals to none, the JSON is valid. However, if that thing is not valid, the JSON is not valid, okay? So the is valid stuff would basically be the result of this JSON last error expression. So you would have to decode the thing, not encode, decode the thing, and then check for the last error. So if I run this, and if I try to var dump the is valid variable, hopefully I get a true. And I do. Pretty cool, right? However, if I would to make this JSON invalid, for example, just like this, I get a false. So our code is working as expected. However, now we have something even better. So what we can do now is simply remove this access to the JSON decode, and we can type something like this: JSON. Let me check the function name. JSON validate. There we go. Just pass the JSON string, and we get exactly the same result. This is not valid. However, if I fix the thing on the top, we get true now. So this is finally something that I believe is a bread and butter addition, you know, something that people actually use on the real world. validate JSON strings. You know what I mean? So I'm happy about this change because on top of this, because you know that this given JSON is valid, you can now try to just basically decode it and be confident that the given decode will be actually returning an array, just like that, you know. So once you type this valid, if is valid, of course, you can now actually, with confidence, access to the array variable and just basically, for example, var dump the name, just like that. And hopefully this will give null. And it gives me an error because when you decode, you need to specify that you want an array back, just like that. And if I run PHP index.php, I get Mary as result. So I think this was a very valuable addition. You know what I mean? JSON validate, just super simple function that you give a string and it will give you back the result if the given JSON is actually a valid string, JSON string, I mean, right? Pretty cool stuff. What do you guys think on the chat? What do you have here? Oh my God, that's a lot of comments. That's cool. I love that you guys interact on the chat. I'm gonna be honest with you. I love that you guys just interact with me on the chat because it makes just stream so much fun, you know? Like today I was discussing with, I have created this group, by the way, on Telegram saying 100K on YouTube in 12 months, which is basically my goal. Kind of unrealistic, to be honest, but it is my goal. And on this group, I was kind of discussing with the people, saying, well, you know what? I don't think I'm the type of guy who will spend like 12 hours on ScreenFlow just editing videos and making like videos pretty and without errors, you know. I don't have fun with it. I just have fun like doing live streams and actually interact with people and see people's reaction about the code I'm about to type. And that's the stuff I like to do. So when you guys interact with me on the chat, that makes me really, really happy. So thank you for that, okay? So let's see what we have here on the chat. People love multi-line short closures. However, we are not going to get them for PHP 8.3, which is kind of a bummer. I would love to have them, but we don't. Ilson is saying, hello everyone, welcome to the stream, Wilson. Diniz Ramalho is saying, sup Nuno, huge fan. Diniz, I'm a huge fan of you as well. Roberto is saying, I have the feeling that the new array behavior, some naive custom check is numerical or associative will fail. Just a feeling. Dude, this is a breaking change. The negative array indices is a breaking change, and I have also the same feeling as you. There will be some kind of weird plugin in WordPress or, I don't know, some code being used with very old frameworks that still tries to do some weird stuff. And that will cause that particular piece of code to change, to break, you know what I mean? Arrow function from JavaScript. Yeah, I mean, JavaScript have a lot of stuff from PHP, so why not just have some stuff from JavaScript as well? Vuka is saying, this is the one we want. For real. For life, dude. DC Blog is saying, we don't need final on read-only. Yeah, personally, I think multi-line short closures would be so much more valuable than final classes and read-only properties. However, read-only properties is kind of useful. I must give PHP that, you know what I mean? Wilson is saying multi-line short closures would be very hot in PHP. I do agree. Yeah, well, we need to stop talking about multi-line short closures because at least in PHP 8.3 we are not going to get them, you know what I mean? Logan is saying there is absolutely no use case for anonymous classes. Yeah, however, I do use them in past PHP, I do use them on Livewire Vault. You know, in framework stuff, you actually need anonymous classes. Migrations on Laravel, for example, you know? Application development, I do understand that it's kind of no use, you know. DC Blog is saying, at last, it's going to be so good to have a native function to validate JSON. I do agree, and I forgot to say, besides having this native function to validate JSON, I have heard stories that this doesn't actually decode the thing and put the thing in memory to validate the JSON. So it's kind of performant behind the scenes. So even if you are kind of validating a big JSON, I do think that this is very performant compared, of course, with JSON decode. You could probably guys want to double check that, but that's what I've been told. Nelson was saying, since what PHP version anonymous classes work? I never used them before, only in Laravel migrations. Nelson, I don't know. If you guys know on the chat when anonymous classes were introduced, just put here so everyone can see. Roberto is saying, Mary, you are now a very important person. Everyone in this stream is an important person, by the way. Vugan is saying, Logan, there are a few cases, for example, Laravel switches from anonymous classes for migrations. Yeah, because, I mean, you know, migrations typically have a name like create user table, add column, or whatever. Like, you really don't want to see a class with that name, you know what I mean? So anonymous classes make sense on that specific use case. Mary is saying, yes, I would like to thank you, the Academy, and PS PHP. Yeah. Sergio is saying bread and butter edition. Yeah, you know what? That's what when I'm working with Taylor and also working with a team, sometimes when we are making a new feature for Laravel, we always ask ourselves, is this like a bread and butter edition? Like, is this thing actually going to be used in application development? Are people actually going to use this in their daily basis? Because sometimes when you may have a very cool feature, but if people don't have a use case for it, like what is the goal, you know? So it's kind of important to stay grounded and really understand if people are going to use those new additions. And I feel like some of those additions we are seeing in PHP, not all of them, but some are bread and butter, some others are kind of not, you know what I mean? What else we have here? Team Yola is saying, calling JSON validate before JSON encode is useless. Well, you are forgetting that, again, JSON validate does not work in the same way of JSON decode. Internally, JSON validate, I do know and I'm aware that JSON validate is kind of more performant than JSON decode. And sometimes let's just remind ourselves that sometimes you actually just want to validate a JSON string. You don't want to decode it at all. So that might be useful for those use cases again. Yeah, Team Yola, again, about the JSON decode after the JSON validate behaves differently. And I do know that it doesn't decode the thing behind the scenes. It just has some performant behavior internally. So we may have to double check that though. There is no way of throw an exception directly from JSON decode when not valid instead of having to validate. Yes, there is a way. I think we can do something like, if I remember correctly, we can type something like JSON decode and then pass the JSON string through. And that is like, there we go. So there is this, call it flags. So basically we're saying, okay, I want to decode this given JSON string. I want the return type to be an array. I also want to specify the level of nesting that I support on this JSON decode. However, if that thing is not valid at all, I want you to throw an error. So typically, if we were to, I don't know, make this thing invalid just like that, I think this will throw an exception. Let's just double check that. There we go. PHP is telling me that uncog JSON exception syntax error. So if I just address the issue, now it just works as expected. And indeed, we have this also flag to specify to the JSON decode function that you want an exception to be thrown instead. Logan is saying anonymous classes make sense for migrations. Indeed, Roberto is saying, are there some improvement from the performance perspective using JSON, using the validation in JSON? Dude, that thing of the JSON validate being performant, I need to double check that, you know? I feel that I've seen a conversation about this, but I feel that we probably want to double check that outside of the stream, so I don't give you, bad information. Carrie's saying, since I'm just getting started with PHP, I guess I will never know the pain of being without the JSON validator. Yeah, I mean, some of the people who are starting with PHP this year, we'll never know some of the pains of the PHP in the past, which is pretty cool, I feel like. What else we have? Tim Holly is saying, Tim Holly is saying yes, but only if you don't need to access JSON contents later within the same process. Because JSON validate does not create any data structures, you save the memory allocations in processing time to create the objects and arrays. Yeah, we probably need to double check that, if indeed, probably making JSON validate to before doing a JSON decode doesn't make any sense, indeed. Anonymous classes were introduced in PHP 7. That's probably true. T. Dutrion is saying, anonymous classes are really interesting to do simple test doubles, fakes, in my opinion. That's true. That's a very good point. I forgot to mention that. So typically, I don't know, you may have like this class, call it user repository, for example, you know. And let's assume that this user repository accepts a constructor, and on that constructor you accept, I don't know, some kind of database interface, you know, something like this. Something you could do in your test suite is something like this. New class, user repository, you know. and then you could create something like this. My DB test, for example, is equals to new class. In this class, we'll implement the given DB interface, you know, and then you just put your interface methods just for testing, you know, and you would pass this DB test on your constructor of the user repository. So this is actually a very good example. Thank you, Dutrion, for reminding me about that. So even in your test code, sometimes you don't want to, I don't know, have a separate class in a different folder, for example, or have a separate class in the same file, and you can simply use anonymous classes for this kind of simple behaviors. Good point. Nelson is saying, I think anonymous classes are very useful for creating basic JSON-like objects, like a structure, for example, instead of using new std class. I would probably still use regular arrays for those kind of things. Okay, so you guys are just awesome, you know? You guys are just awesome when you interact so much with the chat, and I can see a lot of stuff here, but unfortunately, I am out of time. So I'm gonna just double check if we have something to talk about on this stream, because just after this stream, I have some sports to do. So I can see that we are kind of ending the document in terms of relevant changes. However, there's one that I would like to talk about coming to PHP 8.3, which is this randomizer stuff. Okay, so I don't know the way that people used to do randomizer stuff, you know, typically, I don't know, get a random string, for example, or even getting a random float. But something you can do now is using this randomizer class, which is something that added to PHP 8.3, by the way. This needs to be... the class was added to PHP 8.2. However, the 8.3 edition have new changes, small updates apparently. So let's see some of those updates. I'm gonna go back into my Sublime Text, and I'm gonna use this class, call it Randomizer. I think that's the name. Let me double check. There we go. Randomizer. Let's just use that. Okay. Now, the first time I saw this stuff, I thought that this was actually a static call. So my first reasoning was like, okay, well, to get a random string, just like that, I thought that I would have to call this thing statically. So I probably would have to give, I don't know, 3 characters like this, like ABC, for example. And then I would have to specify the length, which is 10. Okay. And then I thought I could just get back the random string. However, if I run this with PHP, you will see that it's telling me that this particular method is non-static. Okay, so we do have to create some variable with the name randomizer, for example, and then just type randomizer equals to new randomizer. And then I can call this method non-statically to finally get the result, which is this random string. So let's just run this with var dump, just like that, and see the results. I'm going to clear my terminal, run php index.php, and I do get the random string with all the given characters, which I think is a cool thing. And the length is also specified here as a second argument. I think it's a good addition, by the way, okay? Let's see the following. Let's see also what we have here. I feel like we also have this new get float. I still need to double check if this stuff is actually new or there is additions to this stuff. Either way, this randomizer stuff is kind of, everything is new for me. I have never seen this stuff in my life. So just to let you know, okay? So I'm gonna get now a random float, okay? So what I will do is get back to my Sublime text. Instead of typing random string, I'm gonna type random float. And then just below, adjust my var dump. And obviously now I'm gonna refer to this get float using this new function with a name, get float. And apparently I need to specify the minimum and the maximum float I do accept. So I'm gonna just type, okay, well, the minimum is 0.0 and the maximum is 5.0, okay? And if I now go to my terminal and I type php index.php, I get multiple and different results randomly, which I think is also a very good addition. Still yet to confirm if this is something new, totally new in PHP 8.3 or is something that got improvements, okay? Let's see what people are saying on the chat. I see a lot of people talking about JSON decode. However, yeah, that was the contents of today's stream. Did you guys enjoy it? Did you guys enjoy today's stream? Obviously, we have covered the new additions coming for PHP 8.3, but I also show you a little bit all the new kind of the improvements of the PHP over the years with that small example at the beginning of the stream. We have seen some of the stuff coming for PHP 8.3, read-only amendments, typed class constants, override attribute, but also negative indexes in arrays, kind of a slightly change here. Read-only on anonymous classes, the new JSON validate function, which is a good addition, but also the randomizer additions, which is confirmed already by the chat. 2 new additions to this new class that was previously on PHP 8.2. However, this new stuff, both the get bytes from string and the get float, are totally new to PHP 8.3. Thank you so much for the way you guys interacted today on the chat. That was a good interaction today. I feel that everyone was really enthusiastic about today's stream, which is pretty cool. Thank you so much, DC Blog, for saying that you loved it. Dutrin, thank you so much for saying that you find it interesting. Thank you, Mary. I hope to see you again as well on this stream. Thank you, Tutu. I also enjoy doing these streams, so thank you for that feedback. That being said, thank you so much for being in this stream. I'm also super excited about PHP 8.3, and I see you all on the next stream.